Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. My name is James Fitzpatrick, and on behalf of Building America's Future, I'd like to welcome you to our ongoing America's Future Tour. This is a policy series launched late last year to address some of the most pressing and important issues of our time. The mission of Building America's Future is to inform and empower Americans to take ownership of our country's policy direction and demand that our government, at all levels, enact policy reforms to improve the lives of Americans and make America's future strong. Today we are discussing lowering the cost of living. As a Pennsylvania job creator, business leader, and thought leader with detailed policy proposals on how to lower the cost of living for all Americans, we look forward to hearing from our special guest, Dave McCormick. We also want to give a warm Pennsylvania welcome to Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. And with that, I'll turn things over to your Pennsylvania State Senator, Camera Bartolotta, for some remarks and the beginning of our program. Thank you.
There you go. 31 years having an oil change business. You'd think I'd be able to walk around a little tiny bit. Gee whiz. Thank you all for being here on this wonderful brisk fall day. We are so very, very happy to have these two fine leaders, these wonderful gentlemen, visit the 46th Senatorial District. I really want to thank James for your intro and our wonderful hosts right here at Atlas Metal Conversion. I've known Richard and David for a little while. They are extremely great people. They care about their employees and they care about their community. Thank you to Building America's Future for the amazing work that you do elevating important public policy issues like how we tackle the cost of living. Is anybody really tired of seeing every single bill you pay double? We're very tired of that. We know it all too well. And thank you to Dave McCormick and Governor Glenn Youngkin. It is a privilege to be with these two fine leaders today. I have two jobs this afternoon. Well, three, and I blew the first one, obviously. Two jobs. Tell you what it is we're talking about and introduce a very tall man and the great governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. First, our topic, lowering the cost of living. We all know inflation has hit hard. We see it when we're at the grocery store, when we're out for a meal, and when our paychecks just can't keep up. Here's a number for you, $968. Pennsylvanians are paying $968 more dollars every month to pay for the same things that we did in January of 2021. $968 more. Let's just round it up to 1,000. That adds up to $12,000 every year, more than we were paying in just 2021. That is a tax that we all feel. A tax that should energize all of us to send someone to the United States Senate who really understands its impact on the working class and will work tirelessly to fix it. Now is the time to address the crushing tax burden of big government policies. Since I was elected in 2014, I've been championing permitting and tax reform in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has sacrificed billions of dollars in lost capital investment opportunities throughout the years. That is why the Pennsylvania Senate has taken significant steps to address the state's tax structure. Pennsylvania used to have one of the highest corporate net income taxes in the nation. This past July, finally, we approved a fiscally responsible state budget that continues to phase down the CNIT, keeping us on track to take this tax rate from one of the nation's highest to one of the nation's lowest in the years ahead. My proposal to give hard-working Pennsylvanians the same tax benefits afforded to investors also became law in July. It brings Pennsylvania in line with the Internal Revenue Service tax laws relating to the depletion of wells and mines. Now, landowners can claim the same depletion rate on their royalties as businesses that purchased mineral rights. This is going to give our farmers thousands of dollars to put back into their pockets, on their table, or in their barn. A retired public school teacher farmer living in Washington County brought that important issue to my attention, and he deserves the full credit for the financial benefits families will soon enjoy. I would be remiss if I didn't briefly mention that we also took a significant step to address the persistent problem of permitting delays as part of this past budget. The new program called Streamlining Permits for Economic Expansion and Development, SPEED, which is something that the DEP has not heard of ever in its existence. It will establish permit review timelines by the Department of Environmental Protection and Conservation districts. New permit tracking systems will be implemented, and applications will now have the option for third-party review for air, earth disturbance, and water permit applications. Finally, we got something done with permitting. Changes as part of this budget ensure Pennsylvania is competitive with other states that do not face the high cost of developing industrial and business sites like Pennsylvania does, literally paving the way for more investment and growth. Meaningful, important reforms can and are happening, but we need to make sure we're getting the right people in office to continue. Just yesterday, I was at a press conference featuring a bipartisan coalition of officials, school administrators, labor leaders, and my colleague across the aisle and across the state and across the building, Elizabeth Fiedler. And it's a bill that she sponsored, and it's solar for schools. Some of our schools are barely eking by. They're graduating 34 kids a year. They're paying exorbitant amounts for their energy and all the other costs. This bill will help all of the schools that qualify use a solar array to offset those costs, hopefully putting money back into the pockets of people who can't afford ever increasing school property taxes. So those are some of the things we're doing in Pennsylvania's legislature and right here in Pennsylvania to try to curb the massive and burdening pressure of ever increasing costs and inflation and unaffordability. But today, I want you to know that we are here to listen to two great individuals. We also know that they're going to talk a little bit about energy. Southwestern Pennsylvania is known as the energy capital of the world, and for a very good reason. We have a robust homegrown natural resources right here supporting our nation's needs, and we want to use those resources to export freedom to the world, to lower every cost in Pennsylvania for every manufacturer, for every industry, for every homeowner and every business owner. So these are the things that we're trying really hard to do for you here. First of all, we need to take Pennsylvania's House back in November. And secondly, we need to elect a Republican governor in 2026. That's our goal, that's our mission, and we have to start now. Governor Youngkin knows a thing or two about winning a purple state and governing with clear, common sense solutions. He has a 60% approval rating in a state that President Trump lost by 10 in 2020. Why? Because he made promises on the campaign trail in 2021, and then when he got elected, he did something really unusual. He kept those promises. I'm not going to run through the full list, and the governor will share his record, but since we're talking about lowering the cost of living, let me give you one big number. $5 billion. Lowering the cost of living has been a top priority for Governor Youngkin, and he has delivered $5 billion in tax relief for Virginians and working families. How about that? $5 billion. But Glenn Youngkin, the man, like Dave McCormick, is just the type of person you want and need in public office. Born in Richmond and raised in Virginia Beach, Governor Youngkin is a homegrown Virginian from humble beginnings. He used to wash dishes at a local diner. And from what I hear, he's a pretty good short order cook. That's the only thing short about him, by the way. He went on to play college basketball, and you'll see why in a minute, and had a very successful business career before entering public life. But as the center of his life is his faith, his 4 children, and his beautiful wife of 29 years, Suzanne S. Youngkin. My fellow Pennsylvanians, my neighbors, my friends, my constituents, and colleagues, I would love to introduce to you the governor of the Commonwealth, another Commonwealth, of Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin.
Well, good afternoon. Happy Labor Day weekend. How about this? Senator Bartolotta, thank you so much. Thanks for the warm welcome. She does an amazing job for all of you because she understands what it means to serve. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, first of all, I just want to thank Atlas for hosting us today. And for those of you that know this company, that work for this company, you understand the vital role that our steel industry plays in America today, all the way through to making sure that we have conversion capabilities and fabrication and forging capabilities that feed our aerospace and our defense industry, that make sure that we have all of the capabilities that can be made right here in America as opposed to buying them overseas, and most importantly, great jobs. And this industry has $110 billion of revenue around the world, around the United States, and most interestingly is the number of people that it employs. Great, great jobs. And this is why we're all working so hard to bring manufacturing back to America, to make sure that we are employing Americans. And that's why I firmly believe that when we elect the right people, we can in fact say, made in the USA. That's what it's all about. Now, listen, I know folks work hard. I see it in Virginia all the time. One of the biggest challenges that I hear every single day, and as I have a chance to work for about 9 million Virginians every single day, what I hear over and over again is a basic truth. Basic truth is that we're working really hard and we're putting less of it in our pocket. We're paying more in taxes and we are paying more to live. And the big challenge, as you just heard from the senator, is that today for Pennsylvanians and Virginians and everybody else around this nation, it's costing everybody $12,000 a year more to live, to do the basics, than it did 4 years ago. And that is a basic result of misguided policy. You see, the reality is that when you allow unbridled spending, and you end up telling people that your money doesn't belong to you, it actually belongs to the government, then we all forget about who government works for. You see, government, in fact, works for you, and we watch government in Washington today, and particularly in the White House today, get confused, and they think you work for government. They forget that it's your money, not their money. And the reality is, that is why we have seen inflation absolutely overwhelm Americans. 2/3 of Americans today are living paycheck to paycheck. 2/3 of Americans are walking into a grocery store and seeing 25% increase in grocery prices. We're all seeing 50% increases in gas prices, and we know they've been a lot more. We've seen 30% increase in utility bills. We've seen over a 20% increase in broad-based inflation in this country. But it's the staples, it's the things we must buy that hurt the most. And that is what's challenging Americans today. And that's why we need to be real about policy and how it impacts Americans' wallets. You see, somebody might tell you that inflation isn't real. It's transitory. Don't worry about it. Or it was high and now it's low. But I'm just asking everybody, believe what you see and what you feel in your wallet, because that is the truth. You see, I have watched in a Commonwealth of Virginia, and by the way, we're a Commonwealth too. I've watched what runaway inflation has done. Runaway inflation has caused Virginians to all of a sudden wonder if they'll ever be able to buy a house. And the reality is, for Virginians and Pennsylvanians and most Americans, the dream of buying a home has run away from them. Mortgage rates are more than twice what they were 4 years ago. And that has squashed the basic American dream. I want to buy a house. We've watched people have to take 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. We've watched people wonder if they can pay the tuition for their child who's heading off for college first in their family. Can I make the payment? And that's why it's so important that we go to work together. And I want to give you a little encouragement. You see, policy does matter. And what we saw in the Commonwealth of Virginia when I came in 3 years ago was Virginia really stalling. We had more people moving away than moving to Virginia. We saw businesses packing up and leaving, more small businesses closing than you can possibly imagine. And we saw a lot of people who had left the workforce. 150,000 people had left the workforce. And as a result, Virginia was falling behind. But see, common sense works. It works. And so when I came in and I was incredibly honored to be hired, I was a 30-year business guy, and one day I got a little angry and sitting on the sofa, and I got up and I said, I'm going to do something about this. And I told my wife, Suzanne, that I was going to quit my job and run for governor. And once she stopped crying, we prayed over it and we committed ourselves to try to make a difference. And the reality is you can make a difference. You see, right out of the box, we opened Virginia up for business. And we told businesses, I'm going to work for you. We're going to streamline regulations and get at least the state government off your back. We're going to go to work to fight back against Washington so that we can try to get the federal government off your back. I'm going to go to work to make sure that you can keep more of your hard-earned money in your pocket. And we put forth $5 billion of tax relief, and we've got another $3 billion ready to go. And all of a sudden, Virginians said, hey, wait a minute. Maybe government's working for us. Maybe we should be optimistic. Maybe there's a better day tomorrow. We also recognize that when people can keep more of their hard-earned money in their pocket, guess what they do with it? They spend it. They spend it. So we've had record tourism. We've had record receipts at the state level that allow us to invest in education and law enforcement to make sure that we have better education and safer communities. And it also allows us to go back and say we should reduce taxes further. Folks, the cost of living for Virginians, Pennsylvanians, and Americans is at the heart of what we are talking about. If we can tackle this runaway inflation that was unleashed by the Biden-Harris administration, that took us to levels of inflation that we literally hadn't seen in over 40 years. If we can, in fact, get back to basic truths, that, in fact, too much money in the system breaks the system. Basic truths, which it's your money, not government's money. Basic truths, which is when it's in your pocket, you'll make good decisions on where you want to spend it. And good decisions that when we unleash the opportunity that businesses provide for jobs and growth, well, we can have a better day tomorrow. And that is what we are facing today. Two realities. And it's not a philosophical debate, we've seen it. Two realities that Policies focused at driving up inflation make it hard on Americans. And policies focused on common sense reality make it better for Americans. And that is what we're all talking about now. Now, this next chapter works because when we implement common sense, conservative policies, then we have great outcomes. And I have to say that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we've had record job growth, we've had record income growth, and we got a lot of people moving to Virginia today. And I always tell all my friends when I visit their states, I won't recruit people to come to Virginia, but by the way, the door's open if you want to come. One of the areas that I think has been at the heart of bad policies has been energy policy. And at the heart of runaway inflation has been the cost of energy. The cost of gas at the fuel pump, the cost of your heating bills, and the cost of your electricity bills. And a facility like this requires a lot of power, requires a lot of energy in order to get things done. And we have watched, again, bad policy at the federal level do everything they can to try to extinguish America's biggest asset. We were and need to be energy independent. And when we embrace an all of the above, all American approach, we win. We win. So I can't help but be in this amazing part of Pennsylvania where I know what's here. I know what this part of Pennsylvania can do for not just Pennsylvania, but for America, and by the way, the world. When natural gas turned into liquefied natural gas can be shipped around the world and power the world. That should be absolutely opened, should be unbridled prosperity. And that's at the heart of what I know America needs to do. You see, we're at a moment of crossroads. Good policies and bad policies. Opportunity and lost opportunity. A future that's bright and one that continues to see government invade into our lives. And I have to tell you, I know the one I vote for. It's the former. And that's why I stand for all of the above, all American energy policies. That's why I stand strong for economic policies that are common sense oriented. It's your money, not government's. That's why I stand for seeing a workforce that can rise up and take great jobs and have great careers. That's why I want education to be the best that we possibly can to prepare the next generation to take the baton and run. That's why we stand for safe communities. But at the heart of it, it's your money, and you should keep it. And that's why I am so pleased to introduce a friend of mine, Dave McCormick. Dave and I have been friends for a long time. Dave is born right here in Pennsylvania. In fact, Dave was born right here around the corner. Dave understands what sound economic policy means. It translates into bringing down our cost of living and allowing Pennsylvanians and Virginians and Americans to in fact live their lives and prosper, as opposed to watch government extinguish it. And that's why I'm so proud to support Dave. And that's why I'm eager for all of you to hear from Dave McCormick, a man who served our nation. He went to West Point. He served in our Army. He received a Bronze Star. He understands what it means to work. He's built businesses. He has served our government. And now he wants to serve every single Pennsylvania. And I am so proud to see him as the next senator from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Good to be here in Washington County. I was born in Washington Hospital. I grew up outside of Scranton, but I was born here. My mom and dad were public school teachers at Baldwin Whitehall, and they had, my mom had me in the Washington Hospital. It's grown a little bit since then. Senator Bartolotti, I don't know where, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all you're doing. And Governor, thank you for being here so much in Pennsylvania. We're very proud of you. So my teleprompter is like halfway through my speech. There we go. Okay, thank you. So despite the disastrous economic policies of Biden-Harris and this White House, Governor, you've managed to cut taxes, reduce regulations, and make life better for the citizens of your great Commonwealth. So you're a great role model. Under your leadership, Virginia and pro-growth economic policies for America are available for all to see. So thank you for what you're doing on behalf of all of us. So like the governor, I spent more than 20 years in the private sector. Right here in Western Pennsylvania, I helped create hundreds of jobs working at a Pittsburgh-based company called Free Markets, I was the CEO of that company. That was part of the Pittsburgh Renaissance. When you go downtown in Pittsburgh today, it's sort of hard to recognize the Pittsburgh of today versus the Pittsburgh of then, unfortunately. As CEO, I learned a few fundamental lessons about our economy. The first lesson is when you give Americans a fair shot at good education and training, they succeed. Second, Americans know how to run businesses and spend their money better than government bureaucrats do, right? It's a pretty obvious thing, but it's important. Third, don't crush small businesses. Small businesses create 80% of the jobs in our great Commonwealth. Don't crush small businesses and families with taxes and regulations and rising prices. American businesses will win when they compete on a level playing field. Those are the 4 lessons. But unfortunately, weak liberal career politicians like Senator Bob Casey, like Vice President Kamala Harris, have not learned those lessons. How would they know those lessons? They've spent their entire lives in government. They've spent their entire lives being paid by taxpayers, like those of you in this room. Harris and Casey have pushed through $5 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in new spending, and that new spending has increased all of our prices for hundreds of millions of Americans. And now all of us are literally paying the price. Groceries and rent are up 22%. Interest rates to buy a new home or a car have nearly doubled. And the Harris-Casey war on Pennsylvania's energy sector and energy production here at home has sent our gas prices up by 50%. I mean, there's no part of our Commonwealth that's more affected by these terrible energy prices than terrible energy policies than right here in Western Pennsylvania. Even liberal economists said that Harris and Casey spending would cause prices to rise. They were warned in advance. No, my opponent, Bob Casey, disagreed. He said the risk of inflation was pretty low. He was wrong, and we're all worse off because Bob Casey doesn't understand economics 101. You simply can, and this is the key to my campaign, you simply can't trust Bob Casey with our nation's or Pennsylvanians' economic future. Unlike my opponent, I come from a world where you're judged on your performance and held accountable for your decisions. As a business leader, it's just the way it goes for all of you too. The buck stopped with me. People's jobs and the returns to our investors depended on the decisions that I made. Unlike Bob Casey, I know what it takes to create jobs. It's hard work. I know what it takes to support small business and attract good paying jobs back to communities in Pennsylvania and across America. And as your new senator, I'll shake up Washington and tackle the economic problems that face our country and our great Commonwealth. It's really not complicated, as the governor is saying. With lower taxes, fewer regulations, a cheap and abundant energy supply, a new generation of talented workers, and fair and free trade, we can forge a new era of American renewal that creates opportunities for every working family in Pennsylvania and across our nation. That's our goal. That's what I want to do for you as senator. Now we have a real-world experiment. We can see two contrasting economies. President Trump's policies created a booming economy. Wages were growing much faster than inflation. Unemployment for Black and Hispanic Americans was at record lows. Then the Communist Chinese Party unleashed COVID-19 on the world. But even with that catastrophe, by the time President Trump left office, the economic recovery was well underway. Then President Biden and Vice President Harris showed up, and Senator Casey along with them, and we gave them the reins. And they created an economic disaster for working families across Pennsylvania in four very important ways. First, fiscal irresponsibility that sent prices soaring. They spent too much money. Second, anti-energy policies that drove up cost and hurt energy jobs. Policies that blocked rather than enabled economic mobility, the ability for people to get ahead. And finally, weakness in the face of Chinese economic warfare. First, let's start with their unprecedented taxpayer-funded spending spree. After Harris cast the tie-breaking vote with Bob Casey to pass trillions of dollars of spending, inflation skyrocketed to 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. Compounded inflation, more than 20%. They ignored the warnings from even people within their own party that their spending plans would set off a once-in-a-generation set of increases in prices. They promised inflation would be transitory, and they kept spending more. And the impact on Pennsylvania families has been anything but transitory. Every week at the grocery store, all of you see it, prices rising, and they continue to rise as the pay stub doesn't keep up. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans and Pennsylvanians say they now live paycheck to paycheck. Paycheck to paycheck. And it's no wonder, with the cost of a dozen eggs nearly doubling and milk alone up 37%. Here in Pennsylvania, staples like a shorty hoagie from Wawa cost 72% more than it did when Biden came into office. And for women who are balancing work and taking care of their families, these price increases hit even harder. They are truly, these women, the bedrocks of our economy. My mom worked her entire life. My wife, Dina, waitress to pay for college before going into a career in business and government. But this balance in families, this balance by working mothers is getting harder and harder. And weekly wages for women and across our country are 4% lower than they were since Biden's inflation and Biden and Harris came to office. And new regulations from Washington, I hear this all the time, I hear it here. New regulations for Washington are making it harder for employees to offer flexible jobs for women who want to work while raising their children or caring for family members. Then, while hardworking Americans were struggling to make ends meet, Harris and Casey decided it'd be a good time to start borrowing nearly $1 trillion in taxpayer money to pay off student loans. To pay off student loans, right? People I went to high school with worked their way through. They're paying student loan forgiveness for people that are 40 years younger that are getting their loans paid off today. Bob Casey also fought to reinstate a tax deduction that would give massive tax breaks to millionaires in California and New York at the expense of Pennsylvania taxpayers. This is radical, liberal economic policy at its finest. Increase the cost of living and force the majority of Pennsylvanians without college degrees to pay for someone else's debt while giving tax breaks to their wealthy donors. This is the policy of Biden and Harris. Now, what have you heard about? Have you heard about their newest, brightest economic idea? An economic plan that cost another, this was her speech last week, $1.7 trillion of government spending and Venezuela-style price controls on groceries and other essentials. We've tried all this before. It destroyed our economy and made inflation even worse and emptied our store shelves. Enough is enough. The second crisis here is that Harris and Casey's policies have driven up energy costs. Kamala Harris is the greatest ally of radical environmental groups. In her own words, she wants to pass the new Green Deal and reduce fossil fuel production by banning fracking, killing jobs here in Pennsylvania, and making energy even more expensive. Her own words. You don't have to trust me, just see what she says. And Bob Casey's a sure thing. He'll be right there with her, voting with Biden-Harris administration 98% of the time. Nowhere is this disastrous policy agenda more clear in the regulatory crusade against energy. Harris and Casey wield federal permits and environmental regulations as the backdoor to making investing in Pennsylvania energy harder and more difficult to get crucial energy projects off the ground. These policies actively disincentivize energy production here at home, and they contribute to rising fuel prices. Third, this radical economic agenda has wiped away the American dream for a generation of Americans. 2/3 of us think our kids are going to be less well off than we are. After 18 years in the Senate, Bob Casey has done nothing to help grow up to be better off than their parents. The sad reality is it's getting harder and harder to move up the economic ladder. A recent study found that children who are born to parents in the lowest quartile of incomes have a 46% chance of remaining in the lowest quartile and a 3% chance of getting to the top quartile. That is the American dream. The generational opportunities that have long defined American life are slipping away, and we need leaders who are committed to reversing the course. And finally, weak politicians like Bob Casey and Harris have let China steal our jobs and innovation ideas for far too long. China's rise was fueled by the loss of millions of American jobs, including more than 220,000 manufacturing jobs right here in Pennsylvania because of unfair trade. They hollowed out communities across our Commonwealth, including my hometown of Bloomsburg, which had a carpet mill with 2,000 workers. And Bob Casey has done nothing. It's remarkable that Casey claims he's strong on China despite an 18-year record of appeasing China and supporting policies that undermine American competitiveness. And even worse, while serving as Pennsylvania treasurer, Bob Casey oversaw the investment of tens of millions of dollars in public pension funds in Chinese firms that the Pentagon later called a direct threat to U.S. national security. Bob Casey's taken thousands of dollars from lobbyists who represent Chinese companies with direct ties to the People's Liberation Army. No, America's economic future is too important to be placed in the hands of liberal career politicians like Kamala Harris and Bob Casey. We need strong leaders, like the governor, who are proven job creators in Washington, who will make it our priority to grow our economy and ensure great, good-paying jobs, rising wages for all hardworking Americans. That's what we need. And the absolute best way to achieve this vision is to empower American workers and American entrepreneurs. They're the job creators. We need to rebuild the world's most dynamic and competitive economy that will give all Americans a shot at their American dream. Here is what I would do in the Senate to lower cost and create economic opportunity across our Commonwealth and our nation. Number one, first, reverse the irresponsible spending spree of Harris-Casey, cut taxes and regulations that hold back American workers and American entrepreneurs. That's number one. We need to claw back inflationary spending on liberal pet projects and deliver another round of tax relief for the middle class. I recently put forward a pro-family agenda that would significantly increase the child tax credit and give every working family access to a tax-free savings account to pay for up to $10,000 per year of child care costs. It's getting too expensive for many people to have kids. What's Bob Casey done? He's voted against the 2017 Trump tax cuts and put more money back in the hands of millions of Pennsylvania families by lowering income tax rates and doubling the standard deduction in child tax credit. That's what he's voted against. Even though the average family of four in Pennsylvania saw their tax bill decrease by $2,000 based on those tax cuts. Next year, Congress will act to keep many of those cuts in place, and that fight will be far too important to have tax and spend liberal Bob Casey representing our Commonwealth's working families. It's also time to free job creators on Main Street from bureaucratic red tape and make it easier to start a business. That's why I support President Trump's executive order that required cutting 2 regulations for every new regulation that the government wants to put in place. Second, and you believe it right here in southwestern Pennsylvania, America, led by Pennsylvania, must become the world's most energy dominant nation, period. Strong energy policy, it's good for Pennsylvania workers, it's good for American strength on the world stage, it's good for families who benefit from more affordable, abundant energy supply, and it's good for our environment to have that beautiful, clean, natural gas coming out of the ground here in Pennsylvania and going to countries around the world. We got to make energy a priority. Third, we got to create more opportunities for students and workers to succeed. Far too many kids in our Commonwealth are being left behind by our education system. Nearly half of Pennsylvania's 4th and 8th graders cannot read proficiently at grade level, and only 26% of 8th graders are proficient in math in Pennsylvania. This is a national disgrace. A national disgrace. Parents should have the right to choose the school that is best for their child, rather than being forced to attend failing schools based solely on where they live. And nowhere in our country is the kind of leadership we need more evident than in Virginia, where Governor Youngkin has been a tireless advocate for school choice. Now, a lot of this happens at the state, but in the Senate, I'll work to support strong leaders like him and expand school choice by supporting a federal tax credit for contribution to scholarship funds. We also, I see this all over Commonwealth, we also face a skilled labor shortage. Yeah, and I should have said thank you to Atlas Metal. We see it everywhere across our Commonwealth. I bet we see it here. We don't have enough skilled labor. Far too many Americans are out of a job or out of the workforce altogether. And it requires a reimagination of how we educate, train, and foster that perfect resource of human capital. I'll support creating a workforce Pell Grant that expands registered apprenticeship programs, because technical training and other vocational opportunities deserve the same respect, the same financial support that our country gives towards 4-year educations. I see it all the time. I see it with my fellow veterans, many of whom want to work in the trades and can't get the opportunities they need. I'd also change the GI Bill, which I took advantage to make that more accessible to veterans. And finally, we need to ensure our trading relationships benefit American workers. Don't punish, benefit American workers. When done properly, with like-minded nations, free and fair trade can make Americans better off at home. But that's not the case with an adversary like the Chinese Communist Party. They don't play by the rules. And leaders in Washington have let China steal our strategic industries and failed to preserve reciprocity, a fair trade, in our trading relationship with China. No more. The days of unbridled free trade and investment in China must end. I've put forward a detailed plan to overhaul the U.S. relationship with China, to reduce our dependence on the CCP and to fortify American economic strength. That includes shifting supply chains to more trusted partners based on fairness and reciprocity, and ending any U.S. investment or trade that supports Chinese military or security services. Now it's hot, and I've gone on a little bit long, but listen, this is our future, folks. And it's not about me, and it's not about most of you. This is about our kids. It's about their futures. Throughout this campaign, I've reinforced the one thing, the fact that leadership is what makes the difference, and leadership is about accountability. It's about accountability. It's about taking responsibility. That word, accountability, is not in Bob Casey's vocabulary. He has failed. He has failed the most basic test of economic policy. And he's not taken responsibility for the terrible decisions I've highlighted today that have hurt terribly our Commonwealth and working families across our great state. In fact, while I've laid out a 6-part Keystone agenda to reclaim America that's put solutions forward, Bob Casey's made a very different choice. Not only has he attacked me with a bunch of baseless lies, he's doubled down on Kamala Harris's radical vision that has made American families so much worse off. America cannot sleepwalk into another 4 years of weak leadership, rising prices, and fewer opportunities to get ahead because of these radical liberal policies in Washington. To put it mildly, I'll be a very different kind of senator. This is a choice. This is a choice, my friends. This is a choice between a senator who will be a leader and a senator who will continue to be a follower. This is a choice between a senator who will demand change versus one who will continue to accept the status quo. A choice between a senator who will draw on experience building and leading businesses and a career politician who spent his entire life living off of all of you, the funding of our taxpayers right here in Pennsylvania. This is a choice between a senator who will stand up every day for the working families of Pennsylvania versus a 98% vote for liberal policies that are destroying families across our great Commonwealth. My friends, this really is, we always hear people say it, but this really is the most important election of our lifetime. It really is. We can act now. We can get America on a better path. With your support, we can send a clear message in November to Washington politicians who got us into this mess in the first place. I'd be honored. I'd be honored to have your support and your fight, and this is a fight for our children's economic future. Thank you so much for being here.